Hi, I'm Michelle with the Garrett Public Library, and I'm going to be doing this week's Railroader reading. I'm going to be reading just a few things out of the January issue of the Reader's Digest. Just a couple short stories that have to do with holiday magic. The first one is Real Live Elves. There's a little bit of a prologue to it. It says, when local kids needed more than toys, strangers started checking off Santa's list. For years, Jessie the elf had been a holiday fixture in Stephanie Levinson's pre-K classroom at San Fernando Elementary School in Los Angeles County. A veteran teacher in a severely disadvantaged neighborhood, Levinson knew that her young students had it rough. Some were homeless, many were in foster care, others were crammed into garages or single rooms with 8 to 10 other family members. So she made sure that Jessie, the class elf on the shelf, was good to them every holiday season. It was hard to do on a teacher's salary, but from the post-Thanksgiving return until the Christmas break, every day Jessie managed to bring the kids some little token of holiday magic, a pack of crayons, a pencil, something. No matter how small the gift, her students were always grateful. And there was a good chance it would outshine whatever their families could afford to give them. Despite being surrounded by wealthy neighborhoods, their community was so poor that when it rained, kids came to school wearing trash bags. Some didn't brush their teeth because they didn't even own a toothbrush. Then the pandemic hit, and the district switched to online learning. Zoom opened the educators' eyes to many other physical hardships their students faced. For Levinson and her colleagues, it was a peek behind the curtains into their students' home lives. And what they saw quite simply broke their hearts. One kindergartner spent her daily 6 hours of Zoom hunkered at the back of a mini-mart while her father worked. Others attended virtual class from motel rooms where their families were temporarily sheltering. On screen, some students had several siblings in the background, all sharing one bed and doing online school for various grades. Levinson began to hear a common complaint. They would tell me they were cold, she says. They'd be trying to type on the computer and you could see that their little fingers were cold. It was Southern California, so the temperatures weren't frigid, but it did drop into the 40s, and a lot of the kids were working in unheated spaces. Levinson knew she had to do something, but on her limited means, how could she possibly keep all her students warm? She created a simple wish list on Amazon, a blanket for each of her 24 students to stave off the cold. On the Nextdoor app, she made a heartfelt plea to the residents of her well-heeled neighborhood. Help keep my students warm and bundled on Zoom, she wrote. She explained the situation, pointed any potential donors toward her Amazon wish list, clicked send, and hoped for the best. 5 minutes later, she got a text from a neighbor. I'm looking at your wish list, the message read, but there's nothing there. Levinson reopened the Amazon page. Just like that, in 5 minutes flat, her neighbors had fulfilled the wish in its entirety. Quickly, Levinson reached out to her colleague who taught the school's other pre-K class. Can I add your class? She asked. Sure. And just as quickly, the second class was showered with donated blankets. Still more messages came in. We want to buy. We want to help. There's nothing there. So Levinson looped in a third classroom and kept updating the wish list. How about hoodies for the kids? Scarves, mittens, umbrellas, school supplies. Her plea had gone viral, and in the days that followed, it seemed that whatever she asked for, generous donors from California to Texas to Pennsylvania were willing to provide. Levinson had always been touched by how caring and generous her students were. If they received some small gift, they'd often ask shyly if they could share it with their siblings. If classmates were having a bad day, their little friends would surround them with questions and hugs, seeking to make things better. So when the donations came pouring in, Jessie the elf joined Levinson's Zoom class to deliver an important message. I hear you're being good. You'll be getting rewards soon and gifts from Santa. The packages piled up in Levinson's one-bedroom apartment. With the help of colleagues, she'd sort the donations and carry them to a distribution point for grateful parents to pick up. Often the kids were along for the ride, giving Levinson another chance to reiterate Jessie the elf's message. Jessie brought all these things because you're working so hard and you're so kind. She wants you to be kind, or she wants you to be warm and happy because you make her happy every day. And each new morning, Jessie made her appearance on Zoom to reveal what new reward the kids' generous behavior had wrought. Christmas comes but once a year, but giving knows no calendar. As the summer of 2021 drew to a close and students and teachers prepared to return to in-person schooling, Levinson started hearing from her pool of donors. We want to help with back to school, they said. Do you need stuff? Can we help? With school supplies as expensive as they are, of course the families needed help. Once again, Levinson put up a wish list, and the response was so overwhelming that she arranged for each of the school's 600 students to receive a backpack filled with supplies. For Christmas 2021, the community again came bearing gifts, and Jessie the elf again did her part by distilling the enormous generosity down to fit a child's magical worldview. So many items poured into the school that the library stood unusable for weeks, piled as it was with packages. Besides the blankets, hats, gloves, scarves, hoodies, umbrellas, backpacks, the kids received toys, Play-Doh, art supplies, water bottles, fuzzy robes, markers, fuzzy stuffed animals, books, pajamas, socks, jackets, printers for their classrooms, tablets, and more. Parents were in awe of the generosity of complete strangers, says Jennifer Valdemar, the school's assistant principal. At the end of a school day when cars lined up to collect the kids, she says it was not uncommon for parents to roll down their windows and ask, "Who can I thank? How can I thank them?" Monique Luna was one of those parents. "I don't think there's enough words," she says. "There's not enough thank yous to give them. Especially during the pandemic when we were all suffering, still there's somebody willing to help out a random person they don't even know. I wish there was more I could say or do to thank them." But most of the donors were happy to remain anonymous. Like Levinson, they were not in it for the publicity or even for the thanks, but because their hearts couldn't bear to see kids lacking basic necessities. For Levinson, one of the great surprises in all of this was just who chose to give so selflessly. On neighborhood forums, she says, there's so much slander and hate and political garbage. People bashing teachers. But when something like this comes up, everybody jumps in to help. Even the people who have been so negative. It's just beautiful. It's just absolute community. I've cried a lot. For the students of San Fernando Elementary School, their universe is simple. They absolutely 100% believe that Jessie brings all this stuff and that their kindness is why it's happening. I love that they believe this, Levinson says. In the world of a young child, what matters is being kind and caring, looking out for one another, sharing what you have. Jessie the elf represents a 2,000-year-old narrative in which a severely disadvantaged child, one born to penniless parents in a drafty barn, would go on to teach the world that it's the children who have it right, that our differences are trivial, and that love is the thing that matters most. In our troubled times, it's easy to believe that the lesson has been lost, but it hasn't. It's just that sometimes we need the little children to reawaken it in us. And that was the end of that story. I think we have time for one more short one. It's called A Home for Christmas. An expectant couple and wise man, not the ones you're thinking. It was in the bleak midwinter, and the wayfaring couple trudged through the frigid night seeking shelter. The father-to-be scanned the roadside for some home, some inn, some stable where his struggling companion might rest safely for the night. He looked over at her frequently. She labored along, her way made heavier by the new life growing inside her. They needed a warm, dry, safe place from the bitter wind. When her time came, it must not be out here along the roadway. Their names were not Mary and Joseph, but Pepper and Cooper, nor were they man and wife, but rather a pair of beagles. And the place was not Bethlehem, but Bethel, Ohio, on a rural highway outside of town. There's just a little illustration of the beagles. That December night, Gus Keeble, a county wildlife officer, was driving home from work when he spotted the pair in the flash of his headlights. It was snowing so hard it was difficult to see, but he could tell the dogs were wearing collars and tags. What were they doing out here on this stretch of road? He parked his truck and approached the animals. Gus squatted and stretched out his hands to the beagles, which made no effort to escape. Gus read their tags by his truck's headlights. He pulled out his phone to call the number listed, but it was snowing so hard that his screen blurred. He placed the dogs in his truck on the floor of the passenger side. By the time he came around to the driver's side, he found that they had climbed onto the passenger seat and were snuggled together there. Gus dried his phone, snapped a picture of the pair, and sent it to his wife, Katie Keeble. Then he dialed the number from the dog's tags. A man answered and immediately grew defensive when Gus told him why he was calling. "I gave those dogs away," the man said. "They're not mine anymore." "Well, do you want them back?" "No, I can't take care of them." The man hung up. These beagles, who looked ragged and uncared for, were abandoned then. No home at all in this world. Gus looked over at them, their large hound eyes pleading. Gus called the county dog warden's office, but it was after hours, so he left a message, and then he called Katie. "You cannot put them back in the snow," she said. "Bring them home." The Keebles prepared a bed for the dogs in a crate on their warm and close porch and laid out food and water. The exhausted animals lay together, Cooper, the male, periodically lifting his head to fuss over Pepper. Although Gus had dreamed of owning beagles as a boy, keeping this pair was out of the question. The Keebles already had a dog, but he knew someone at a no-kill shelter, the League for Animal Welfare in nearby Batavia. The next day, Katie took the dogs to the shelter to drop them off on one condition. "I'm not signing the dogs over to you if you're going to separate them," she had said. The shelter workers promised her they'd keep the couple together. In the days following, Katie phoned the shelter repeatedly to check on Pepper and Cooper. Soon after Christmas, the beagles were adopted as a pair to a loving family. It's a simple story. Kind-hearted people give shelter to a vagabond couple, but it speaks to the best of our nature. And when kindness and love triumph over cruelty and neglect, it can feel like the greatest miracle of all. And I hope everyone out there has a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bye for now.